Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Procreate the Pilot. Today's session is the Greenlight special. So just a little bit about Procreate the Pilot. So this program this week was basically put together as a pilot for a mentoring scheme, which will be run next year. It's a year-long mentoring scheme, which is aimed at getting more Black producers to be mentored by other Black producers, and the mentees will have the opportunity to really be mentored by some of the forerunners in the industry, and also have access to a wealth of events and courses throughout the year. Now, today's session, our speaker today is the amazing Jasmine Morrison. Jasmine Morrison is an experienced film professional, having worked in production, post-production, and film finance. She previously served as the investment manager at a London-based production firm and has worked on over 100 feature films. Jasmine founded in 2019, Jasmine founded S.O.U.L Cognition, is a film and TV consultancy company which is committed to education on the topics of finance, film finance, sales, and distribution. S.O.U.L Cognition works with individual clients as well as hosting courses to date with S.O.U.L Cognition has hosted a course with Film London and Northern Ireland Screen. Oh my gosh. Jasmine has been featured on both the Best Girl Grip and Screen Star podcasts discussing topics of finance, sales, and distribution. In addition to S.O.U.L Cognition, Jasmine co-owns production outfit Unmanaged Limited. Right. So Jasmine is going to go ahead and take the session away. Throughout the session, you are welcome to ask questions. Please post your questions in the chat, and when we get to the Q&A session, right after Jasmine's presentation, we will then ask the questions to her. Thank you very much for joining, and I'll hand it over to you, Jasmine.
Thank you so much. That's brilliant. Cool. Welcome, everyone. Lovely to see some new faces and some, I'm going to call you guys all old friends now. Seen some of you a couple of times this week. So fancy. So you should all be able to see my presentation there now. I'm going to make that whole screen so everyone can see it. There we go. Great. So we're talking about greenlighting. So the big thing about greenlighting is a lot of it comes down to your pitching. And that's what we're going to be talking about mostly today. So I'm trying to get my picture boxes to sit where I want them to, but for some reason technology is not being my friend today. There you go. As with my other sessions this week, this presentation will be available for everyone after the session. If you want it, reach out to the amazing New Black Film Collective. See, I messed up my words too. Team who have all of the information. All of this information is confidential because it's for your personal use only as someone who is here today, being awesome, learning and honing your skills. Please do not share it with anyone else outside that has not joined the course today. So the very first thing about pitching is that you need to make sure that your project is ready to be pitched. Okay, no one else can tell you when your project is ready to be pitched, but also importantly, do you have a plan for how you're going to pitch? Do you have a strategy moving forward? It's not great to just kind of go out and just pitch at anyone you possibly can in order to specifically gain money. Now, having said that, a lot of what I do when it comes to honing my kind of elevator pitch is that I pitch people that I see and like meet in real life. I've often said to people before, my local corner shop, occasionally I'll be like, oh, and they'll ask me what I'm working on. I'll say, oh, I'm currently working on this, and I will gauge their reaction of how interesting what I've said is based on their feedback. If it's a, oh, okay. If it's a, oh, that sounds really interesting. People will be quite honest with you. So you can use everyday life to start honing your pitch on your project. But the first thing to remember as well, that the first reaction that you get from someone, the first time you ever pitch them, they will be the most engaged they're ever probably going to be. There has been a number of projects that I've received that I've had come back to me time and time and time again. You know, sometimes I've been repitched the same project 5, 10, 20 times. And the more times I get pitched the project, the less I am engaged on each level, because I've heard it before. And unless I can clearly see big leaps and bounds, I'm probably not going to dig into the material as much as I did the first time. The very first time you pitch someone, they are going to be the most engaged with the project. So make sure you really think about, when are you going to start pitching people? The right time to start pitching a project in the project's timeline will depend on the party you're pitching it to. So, for example, you might go to a company like the BBC. Now, they're probably going to want to be on board a project while it's still in kind of early stage development. They'll want to have a say over, for example, who the director might be. They'll want to add notes into the script. They'll want to help form the treatment. You know, there'll be a lot of engagement from them on a development on the development side. So they like to come on board earlier. You have other people that you may not want to, you know, they may not want to be pitched the project until you have a director attached, until you have, you know, a firm plan for the film. So the best thing that I can say that you should start with is establish your relationships with companies that you think might be interested in your project before you ever start pitching them the project, you know, well ahead of that. Build a relationship with these companies. People often ask me when it comes to things like the BFI, the best thing that you can do to try and really get into getting funding from the BFI is like engage in the BFI. So go to BFI network events, meet the people from the fund team at those events, you know, do stuff with, they do events all the time. So look at the website, see what's coming up, see how you can get involved. Is there events you can go to, even in the digital world? Because the more they know you, the more likely they are to want to invest in you because they know about you. So yes, you'll still have to go through the application process, but because they know who you are, they might respond to it a little bit better than if they didn't know who you are. Again, it works the same way with every single company out there. Try and engage people, build relationships before you start pitching them projects. Even if it's I'd love to grab a coffee, we'll have a chat, you know, I'd love to know a bit more about what you do, so that you already know, okay, what stage do they like to come on board projects? What type of projects are they looking for? What kind of budget range? What kind of directors are they interested in? You know, are they interested in working with first-time directors? Do they not really do much with first-time directors? It's really important to have a firm understanding in your mind of, does this project really fit into that company, or am I likely to just get a no because it's nothing like what they do? So what I always do with any project that I ever work on is I start by creating what I call a tracker list, and it'll be all the companies or individuals that I want to target for my project. Okay, so maybe I'll have one for, if I've got a script that I've got, I'll have a directors list that I want to target. There is a reason that all of the directors have been chosen. I know that they make this, you know, that type of material, or they work in that budget range, or I think they're going to have a really great artistic style to bring to the film, whatever it is. But I have a tracker list, I have a target list, and I make it very strategic in my mind of, these are the people that I'm looking at, and I'll work my way down the list. So I'll prioritize it specifically for directors. When it comes to companies and pitching for finance or anything like that, I'll have a list of all those companies. Now, I don't have to go to them one at a time. What I go to them at is the stage where I know like they like to come on board a project. So I'll start with, okay, I'm in development now. I've got a version of the script that I'm really happy with and I'm ready to start sharing with people. So let's have a look at all the people who like to review projects while they're in development. They're happy to look at things that don't have a director attached. Start looking at them and then go out to them and say, hi, so-and-so, love to jump on a call with you this week. Just check in, see how you are, see if you're still looking for the same kind of stuff. And, you know, and then when I'm on a call with them, then I will verbally pitch the project and ask them if they'll be interested to receive more materials. But like I said, I start with a tracker list. It's not random, it's very structured. But remember, like I said before, you can only pitch for the first time once. You can only do that once. So you need to make sure that you're comfortable with the state of the project. So for example, yes, if I had a project that I'd optioned, if I had a script, I could start pitching on the very first draft of the script, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the version I'm happiest with. So I'm going to wait until I'm happy with the script for people to read the script to show that it's the best version of the project I think I'm going to get at that stage. Because I know that it's going to change. I know it's going to change when I bring on a director. I know it's going to change if other parties do come on board the project while it's in development still. So I know it's going to adapt and move along the way. But if I think it's at a stage where I'm ready for other people to read it and decide if they'd like to come on board the project, that's the time when I can go, right, I'm ready to start pitching it to other people. But like I said, you can only do it once, so make sure you're comfortable with the script, because there's no reason, there's no point to, if you're not happy with the script but you go out and start pitching, the conversation is going to be, oh, okay, so when can you send across a script? Oh, we shall have something in 2 to 6 months. You've lost the engagement period with the people that you've been pitching to. You want to make sure that when you're pitching, if they ask you for materials, you have them ready to send. So that's really important as well. But again, remember that no project is ever perfect. It's never going to be perfect, okay? So just make sure it's the version that you're most comfortable with other people reading. When people come on board to a project during development, like I said, they will probably have notes. They probably won't think it's perfect either. They might be big notes, they might be small notes, but you've got to be open to their notes if you do genuinely want them to come on board. If you don't like any of their notes, a lot of the time, maybe it's just not the right fit. So don't ever jump into being part of a deal that you don't think is right for your project, because the long term is it may probably not work out anyway, because you seem to have too many differences up front. So also remember that in their minds as well, any notes that you ever receive is because people, especially if they are looking to potentially invest in the development or anything like that, they're giving you notes to help you make the best version of the film that they can see, okay? But it doesn't necessarily mean that their notes are always right. So make sure that you don't just take notes and just put them in. It's really important to, okay, take notes, digest them, talk to your writer. What does your writer think? Well, we agree with this is a good point, or this one, I don't think that works because of X, Y, and Z. And remember, it's a conversation. Notes are not, it's not a dictatorship. It is a discussion. So, but fundamentally, the point is you're working to be on the same team. So they're not trying to make the project worse. It wouldn't benefit them to make the project worse. They're genuinely trying to make the project the best version that it can be. So notes, people give notes to help you. So always be open to them, always look to, converse around notes as well. So, like I said, you need to have materials ready to send following any verbal pitch you ever give. So what is really great to do, even before you start pitching, is to start creating the materials that you'll use to follow up on that pitch. So sometimes you might create a lookbook, you might create a project deck, or otherwise known as a project presentation. You might decide that it's right for your project to make a proof of concept. Now, proof of concepts, I think we briefly spoke about this on the session that I did on Monday. I don't think you always need to make a proof of concept. A proof of concept to me is if you're doing something that's not been seen before, or if you're doing something that is very artistic, or let's say, for example, you wanted to tell a story as a silent film, or you wanted to do it with no music. In those scenarios, sometimes it can be helpful to see a proof of concept. But if it's, a kind of a drama or anything like that kind of fits into the world of films, that yes, no film is going to be exactly the same as your film, but if it's a format that we're familiar with and things like that, I don't always need a proof of concept. Now, that said, I would always say that if you are working with a first-time director, you want to make sure that you have links to their previous work available. Sorry, I've got something in my eye and it's really bothering me. But make sure you have your materials ready before you start pitching people. Because like I said, I always try and do a verbal pitch to gauge someone's reaction to it before I just blankly send them an email. So I'll call them up and I'll say, oh, hey, how are you? You know, how's it been going? You know, all of that kind of stuff. And then say, so I've got this project that I'm working on that I'd love to tell you about. It's here's some information about it, elevator pitch. Do you think this might be something you'd be interested in looking at? And if they say yes, then I'll say, okay, well, I've got a presentation that I can send across to you, you know, in the next couple of days. If you like it, then I'm more than happy to send the script. The script is ready and available to read. And they'll probably say, okay, great, send it across. But I've got those things immediately. I hang up the phone, I can send it to them straight away, because they're at the most engaged point they're ever going to be. It's the first time they've ever heard about the project, and I've just given them the pitch, so it's fresh in their minds as well. But when you're sending materials, make sure that you keep in mind who the audience, or like the reader for those materials, is going to be, because the information that you include in a presentation for bringing on board a director is going to be different to the presentation that you give to a distributor or a sales agent or a financier. They all require slightly different types of information. So what you'll find is that, and I've done this on all of my films, I'll start with one kind of basic deck that will have like the log line, the budget, what genre it's in, and all that kind of stuff. And then from there, I'll start to make variations. So I'll make a version that is, for example, specifically for music. I'll make a version that's specifically for maybe HODs. I'll make a version that's specifically for raising finance, you know, all of that kind of stuff. But if you can start with a core, that can really help, because then you're just adapting a core versus starting from scratch each time. So generally, across all of the different pitches that you'll give, I say that the main 4 things that people are always going to want to know is the logline, the synopsis, the team, and the budget. Now, the budget that you go in with should always be something that's a kind of comfortable level for the film, but also for you as a filmmaker, a level of budget that you're comfortable that you may know how to raise. You know what the avenues to trying to get this budget is, but the budget number makes sense for the project. So if it's a regional drama, okay, what other regional dramas have you seen that may have a similar target audience to your film? They're also from maybe a similar region, or at least the same country as well. What budget level did they make their film at? You know, things like that. You need to start looking at other films that are out there in the market to be able to best kind of give yourself an indication of what your budget should be. So moving on to our next page. The other thing about when you make these presentations and make these, you know, materials to be able to share with people as well, is that you've got to remember that you're building a brand. Yes, it's a film project. Yes, it is a standalone film, but you've got to remember that actually what you're doing is you've got a product and you've got to build a brand for the product that you're selling. Okay. So you've got to make sure that your design is consistent across all of your materials. And it's also got to be well presented. Now, this is something that I've seen before, where occasionally I'll get some kind of presentation through and it's sent to me in Word. It's all just words. And I just sometimes question, does someone realize that we work in a visual industry? Now, filmmaking and storytelling, if I just wanted to tell stories, I would make podcasts. But I don't just want to tell stories, I want to show and tell stories. So you need to show and tell me your story in these presentation materials as well. We work in a visual industry, so make sure that you're also only using high quality images. Don't use anything that's blurry. Keep your font and size of font consistent throughout. Make sure that, you know, you're not just suddenly using Arial on one page and Helvetica on another, because I'm just going to go, what's the branding here? Because the thing is, I often get decks that don't make any sense from page to page. And the problem is, when you send across a presentation like that, it's also a representation of, is this what the film will look like? Because there's nothing consistent from this thing to this thing. And I'm not really sure what you're trying to tell me through all of this. So you've got to be aware of the fact that your branding, you're not just branding of like, oh, this looks good. it's got to be branding that's consistent with the film that you're telling. So even your type of style of branding, the colors that you used, all this kind of stuff, make sure that they tie into what the project that you're making is. You know, if I'm making a slasher horror movie, I'm probably not going to have a pink background on my documents because it doesn't fit in with the genre that I'm telling. So make sure that it feels consistent. It feels like a brand. You're always just plugging that brand. You're showing your style, your vision, and all this kind of stuff through your presentation. So be aware of that when you're creating them. But also the one other thing as well that I've seen before that's a big mistake is that the information that's provided in all these different places isn't consistent. So sometimes I'll have it on page 3 that the main character is called X, and I'll get down to cast pages and suddenly I don't even see that character name. And it's because somewhere along the line, the character name's been changed and someone forgot to change it in the deck in both places. And that's really important because, again, it's down to consistency and eye for detail. And those are things that are skills in filmmaking as well. So by not doing the best job on your presentations, you're also not representing yourself in the best light. So, you know, make sure your budget numbers are the same, make sure what you're offering is the same, whatever it is, make sure it's all the same across all of your different documentation, because people will notice that and it will A, confuse them, and B, make it look that you haven't, you know, done the work of proofreading your own work. It's really important to make sure that you've got that consistency there and you've got all of the right information. But more than anything else, make sure that it's easy to read, because again, I will probably not spend, especially if you're, you know, pitching to sales agents, distributors, financiers, these people are really busy. Okay, I remember when I was working as a financier, there was days when I'd have 15 new projects a day submitted to me. And actually just reviewing the new projects wasn't the whole of my job. So I can't spend all day looking at like these materials. I need to be able to look through quickly. I need to be able to read clearly and be able to try and get back to you quickly as well. Because I've always said to people, it's better that you can give me something short and concise that I can understand what the film is, so that I can get back to you quickly. Because even if it's a no, it's better to hear a no in 2 weeks than it is to wait 3 months to hear no. You still want a quick turnaround of an answer, because at least you're not waiting to hear. We all know it as filmmakers, we've been there time and time again, but waiting to hear is agonizing. I'd sometimes much rather just get a no, that someone's like, no, this doesn't feel right for us, or no, it's not right for us to come on board at this stage. Come back to us when X, Y, and Z. Fine, but at least I know then, and I'm not waiting, I'm not having to chase, all of that kind of stuff that just takes up so much time and can be really frustrating. So make sure, I always say, send any presentation in a PDF format. Don't send things in Word. Don't give me links to things that are online. Send me a PDF document, because the minute you send me something online, let's say, for example, I have to, back in the times we could go places, I have to get on a train ride, and I've got a 3-hour train ride up to Edinburgh or something. I don't know how long the train is to Edinburgh, obviously. But let's say I have to go all the way up to Edinburgh. I get up there, I've got 3 hours that I can look at your project. But what if I have no internet that whole time? You've cut your nose off to spite your face. Yes, it looks fancy, the fact that you can send it to me in a web page, but if I have no internet, I can't look at it. If you send it to me in a PDF, I can look at it on my phone. I can look at it, you know, when I'm on the move. I can look at it underground if I've downloaded it. When I'm on the tube, I can look at it quicker and get back to you quicker. So always send things in a PDF format. But also, if you do have videos as part of your pitch, so for example, you may have a director's bio page, you may have added in links to their previous short films. Make sure that you've given them the correct password. Make sure that every time you are looking to send out the deck, the password hasn't been changed, because that's happened to me before as well. When I've sent something out or someone sent something to me, when I've got that sat down, I've finally got some time to look at it, I come to watch the link and it tells me the password's expired, or it tells me that the link's no longer available. Make sure that you're keeping those things up to date. Make sure that you're keeping them either the same the whole time those presentations are out there, or if you do change the passwords or you change the links, correct it in your presentation. Make sure that you're sending people the version with the most up-to-date information. If you change your budget, whatever it is, just make sure that the information is correct before you send it out to people. If you make changes, reflect it in these presentation materials. Like I said before, the materials you present also reflect on you as a filmmaker. Because if you're sending me something that doesn't look good, I'm also going to wonder if your film's going to look good. So make sure that you're delivering something that's high quality. Now, this is one that I often get very frustrated about with filmmakers, because you'll often see that someone will send you a presentation and they'll say synopsis, but they've actually only explained to you what happens in Act 1. And that's not a synopsis, that's an extended logline. If I went on Wikipedia and I went down to the plot section, I would expect it to tell me what the whole story was. A synopsis is a concise telling of the whole story. You should make it clear what the main storyline is, and also what happens in Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3, because it's important for people who are looking to come on board the project to understand what happens in it. We don't necessarily want to have to read the whole script to understand if we like the concept in the first place. Because if I think back, like I said, 15 new projects a day, if I had to read the script of every single one of those, I would never finance a film because I wouldn't have time. Each script, let's say we're talking about feature films, is at least an hour and a half to read it. An hour and a half times 15 in a day, I'm not going to get back to everyone. So make sure that you have a synopsis that is a concise telling of the whole story, because if I like the story from the synopsis, I will still want to read the script. But it means that I can then go, right, I now understand what happens. I want to see how it's executed in the script. In the same way that when you go on to Netflix, you read a logline, and if the logline sounds interesting, you'll watch the project. You can probably work out what happens. Especially if it's a documentary about someone who is well known, it's not necessarily going to surprise you what happens in the story. It's about the way it's told in the story. That's about execution. So again, a synopsis should be a concise telling of the whole story. Make sure it doesn't read like bullet points. I've occasionally read synopses where people are like, right, I'm going to tell you the whole story, but this happens, then this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and then that happens, and then this thing happens, and then that thing. And that is not an engaging way to tell a story. If you tell me a story like that, I'm worried that the script is going to also be bad, because there's no flow to it. It should feel like you're telling me a short version of the story. You are concisely telling me a story, not a set of bullet points. So make sure it flows, make sure there is feeling and emotion in it as well. It should feel like I said, it should feel like a story. It shouldn't feel like bullet points. It shouldn't feel like plot point, plot point, plot point, plot point, plot point. It's really important. You want me to engage with it, tell it to me in a way that's engaging. But also explain to me who your main characters are. Don't just say, there's this one character the whole way through, because you'll get down to cast pages and I'm like, who are these people? Especially when you are making a presentation, make sure that you establish who your main characters are. Make sure that at least for your very lead character, I understand what their motivation is, what their journey is. Why are they even here? All of these types of things. I want to understand that, so I understand what is this thing that I'm trying to get involved in. Do I want to get involved in it? Does it work for me? Do I care about this character? Very often I've read scripts where in the first 10 to 15 pages, I know nothing about the character and therefore I don't care about their journey. I feel very bad for my grandma because I use this example quite a lot, but my grandma is an absolute superstar at telling stories that no one else cares about, because it will be like, oh, so my neighbor's cat's previous owner's cousin's sister's granddaughter did this thing. And I'm like, I don't know who this person is. I don't know why I should care about this story. I have no context of why this is important about anything. So you need to make sure that I know the character, I care about the character in order to be caring about their journey. So establish at least, not in huge paragraphs, but establish to me, why are we on this journey with this character? Often the question I ask filmmakers is, why now? Why tell this story now? Why now? And why start at that point? Question yourself when you're in your development process of like, okay, why now? Why do we start the story here? What's this bringing? Because it will also inform you when you get to your synopsis. But also when you're writing a synopsis, you need to make sure that you're clarifying the genre of the project within the synopsis. So for example, if I tell you that I'm making a comedy film, my synopsis should read like it's funny. I should be able to clearly understand how the comedy comes through. If you tell me it's a dark comedy, I also need to understand, how is this funny? What type of comedy are we really talking about here? Because a lot of the time, dark comedy can deal with things that are very serious in our lives, and things that, let's say we take something like bereavement. Now, if I said to you, I'm going to make bereavement funny, I would sound very, very probably not like a very nice person, if I'm honest. So establish to me how you're going to make it funny. Make sure that the synopsis clarifies who the characters are, you know, how these funny moments come about, you know, all of this kind of stuff. Because if I can't see the comedy within a synopsis for a comedy film, I'm probably not going to think it's funny. If you tell me it's a thriller and in the synopsis it doesn't feel like there's lots of twists and turns going on, for example, it's probably not going to feel like a thriller. It may feel like a drama instead. So make sure the genre of the project is also established through the telling of the synopsis. And really importantly as well, you need to make sure that your synopsis relates to your logline. Again, it's another thing that I see filmmakers doing, where I'll read a logline, I'll read the synopsis, and they feel like two different films. Because what I read from the logline did not lead me to believe I was going to read the synopsis that I did. I often say to people, the best thing to do when you're looking to write your synopsis is make a recording of yourself pitching the story. Like literally physically make a recording of it. Say, we start by meeting this guy, Ben. Ben is 28, he lives in London, whatever it is, but like tell your story vocally, record it, listen back to it. Did you tell me the main plot story the whole way through? Did you tell me about your secondary characters? Did you tell me about your subplot? And when you've listened to that, write down, then start a Word document, and always do it. I always say, like, do it in a document that you can adapt, because you want to change it. It won't be perfect the first time, but also don't try and write your synopsis in 24 hours because it doesn't do very well for your synopsis. You'll come back with fresh eyes in 2 or 3 days time, and you'll have a new, oh, okay, well, that doesn't really work, or maybe I could use a better word there, or things like that. You need to spend time honing it. So write your synopsis first. Then once you've completed your synopsis, then go back to writing your logline. Because like I said, the logline needs to relate to the synopsis, because I'm going to read the logline and then expect what you've just told me to be the story. Also, make sure your logline discusses your main plot story, your main story, because very often, again, I see loglines where I then go to read the script or read the synopsis, and this logline kind of feels like it's actually talking about the subplot, not the main plot. So write your synopsis first, then write your logline, because then they should tie into each other much better than if you do it the other way around. And the most important thing about when you're writing a synopsis is do not leave people on a cliffhanger, because it's really not very helpful, because you don't know what the full story is unless you finish it. It's fine to leave someone on a cliffhanger for a logline, not for a synopsis. You should be telling me what happens in the film in your synopsis. It's not for me to find out later when I read the script. It's for you to tell me, so then I can work out if I want to read the script. It's really important. Now, another thing people often ask me about is comparable films. Now, again, it's something that I see being done wrong quite often, but comparable films are there to tell your reader or really your reader of your presentation what type of film you're making. It's not just to go into, look how successful films in this genre have been. Because yes, if I wanted to compare I could compare any film in a genre. I could say, look at this £2 million indie British movie that's a sci-fi versus Star Wars. There's a big spectrum. So you've got to make sure that comparable titles are no more than 5 years old. They're within the same budget range of your project, and also that you're focusing on the same target audience. Now, the Star Wars audience is not necessarily the same audience who's going to see independent British film. They are probably mostly event film goers, so they're going to see Star Wars, Marvel movies, everything in that kind of spectrum of the world. That doesn't mean that they're frequently going to the cinema to go and watch anything that's backed by the BFI. So who's your target audience? Because it's better to know your niche and target your comparables to the niche audience that you're focusing on. Again, especially when it comes to things like drama and comedy, focus on the local area that, the local area as well. So if you're looking to make a British comedy, then look at how other British comedies in the same kind of budget range as your film have done. Those are your comparable titles. Again, no more than 5 years old, same budget range, same target audience. It's really important to do those things. It's not a good thing to compare your film to something that is a completely different bracket that was made 15 years ago. Because what that budget would get you today will be different, but also the audiences today are different. People are more likely to watch something on a streaming platform if they're in a younger age demographic. If they are someone who was 25, 15 years ago, they're in their 40s now, they might have kids, they might not be able to go to the cinema very often. You've got to think about what is the type of thing that would get this person out of their house. Okay, well, what are the other things that got them out of their house to go to the cinema? Those are the types of things you need to be thinking about. Now, when you do talk about comparable titles, again, information is different depending on who your reader is. So the first thing is to be aware that if you're talking to, for example, private investors who are not part of the film industry, they'll want to know the title of the film, the year of its release, what the budget was, and what it made at the box office, because they'll want to be looking at the budget compared to what the return was in the film, which isn't quite accurate if they're looking at box office to budget. But again, that's a whole nother kind of strain of finance that we're not really going into today. But if you have individuals or companies that work within the film industry, realistically, all you need to do is tell them the title and the year of release. Because we work in film, we're more knowledgeable about it. You don't really need to spell it out to me. I can look at, okay, well, have I heard of this title? Did it do well at festivals? Did it, get released all the, around the world? It's looking at things like that that makes me think, okay, well, does this seem like a good level of risk for me? Will this work for my company? Now, another thing is biographies. Now, and this has to be one of the ones that, especially with all the clients that I work with in the UK, we struggle with the most. A biography is not just, this is who I am. It's about selling yourself and your skills and your experience and your awesomeness, and telling the reader how great you are and why they should trust in you and they should give you money to go and make this film because you know what you're doing. And it doesn't matter if you're working in short films or commercials or feature films or in TV, but sell me your experience. Sell me that you know what you're doing. Make me confident that you can deliver a film, and deliver not just a film, but the film that you're pitching to me. If you are someone who has previously worked on big budget films, name drop those titles. Make me aware of the fact that you've worked on big budget things before, even if it wasn't necessarily the same role, but tell me you've got experience working in this industry. If you've worked in commercials and you've worked for some really big brands, or maybe you make music videos and you've made music videos for really well-known artists, tell me about it, name drop. Because the thing is, the way that someone else will think is that, well, if they could be trusted, if Nike trusted this filmmaker with money to go and make them some content, and especially if they've come back again, they know what they're doing. If this person's made a music video for Iggy Azalea. Well, that's a pretty big brand. They probably had quite a lot of money, and this person's managed to deliver it. Name drop the stuff that you've done. Now, don't necessarily make it a name drop where it's just a list of this is all the stuff I've done, because if you were going to do that, they might as well just look at your IMDb. Make sure it flows, make sure it sells you, but also, you know, make sure it sells the films that you've worked on before as well. So if you have been making shorts, or if you've worked on previous features that have done well, you know, say those things. Especially if you've made short films that have won awards. Let's say, for example, you had a big festival run, a film, you know, you had a short film that was played in 50 different film festivals around the world. Say that. You don't necessarily need to tell me what the festivals were, but as long as you can say their last short film screened in 50 festivals around the world and received a number of awards. Great. That's all you need to tell me, because it shows that there is an audience desire for the work that you're making. But also, if you have won any awards that are kind of more well-known and kind of at the top tier, you know, if you had a film that was BAFTA longlisted or BAFTA shortlisted or Oscar longlisted or shortlisted, if you've had a film that's screened at Cannes, Berlin, Venice, Toronto, you know, tell me about those things, because again, that pushes up the level of like expertise of the filmmaker, because it just shows a really high level of filmmaking talent. But like I said, reiterate that you are a great filmmaker, because at the end of the day, you wouldn't be trying to get your films made if you didn't believe in yourself. So make sure that they know how great you are, because you know how great you are. If I come away going, okay, well, it's great that you've got an MA. I mean, in this industry, a lot of the time, does having a diploma in anything necessarily make the difference of whether I think you can do the job? We know that most people who come out of university, or if they've done an MA or anything like that, a lot of the time they still have to start at the bottom rung. So that doesn't necessarily hype up your experience, even if it's something, let's say, for example, you have gone and done you know, a course at the NFTS or something, for example, or you went to university and you made lots of short films while you're at university. Well, tell me that you've made a number of short films over your career. Don't necessarily tell me about what your university degree is. Tell me that you're an experienced filmmaker, because that's what I'm looking for. But you've got to remember as well, and the reason that it's so important to have great biographies is because they're not just investing in the project. They're also investing in you. They are investing in the project because they believe you can do it. I used the example the other day of, if I know I've got a friend who is really bad at paying me back money, who asks me to borrow money I'm probably not going to give it to them, because I know that historically they haven't paid me back when they've owed me money before. They've showed that their experience of paying back money is not very good. Versus a friend who's always paid me back whenever they've borrowed money from me, I'm more likely to go, oh yeah, I know what your experience is. I can give you money. I trust you. You will do what you say you're going to do. Especially if you've never worked with these people before, and in most cases, you know, for a lot of your career, you'll be working with new people all the time. So make sure that they know that you're great, and they know that you are awesome and can deliver a film and can make not just a film, but a great film, because you've got to make people believe in you. And now for the next couple of minutes, I'm just going to run through some of my final advice. And then after that, we'll get to the Q&A. So if anyone does have any questions, please put them in the chat. Remember that there is no such thing as a silly question. If it's a question that you need to ask in order to be able to understand something, ask it. I will not laugh at you. I have spent most of my career asking questions, and that's how I've learned. So ask them, because this is what I'm here for right now. So I mentioned this slightly earlier at the top of the presentation, but when sending your deck, send it in PDF format, first of all. But in a first email, like I said, I always normally verbally pitch first, and then I will tell people that I'm going to send them some information. But I'll only ever send the deck alone in the first email, unless they specifically request me to send them something else. So for example, if I get on the phone and I say to someone, oh, I've got a deck that I can share and the script's available as well, I'll send you the deck for now, and if you like it, then send the script. If they say to me, no, send me the script as well, then I'll do it. But in most scenarios, I'll just send the deck, because it will mean I'll get a response quicker from someone. Because again, with a deck, I normally say like maximum length for a first deck should be about 12 pages. That includes a contact page at the end, and that includes a cover page, because you want it to be short so that someone can look at it quickly and get back to you. If someone sends me a 25-page presentation, I know that I've got to set aside half an hour for that. You're probably going to get pushed down the list of priorities, because it's not necessarily the highest priority for me to constantly be reviewing new projects that come through. If I don't have an established relationship with you as well, again, you're probably not even the top priority projects that I'm reviewing. So send something short so someone can get back to you quicker. But more importantly, if they want more information from you because they like the deck in the first place, they will ask for it. You don't have to send something. You don't have to send me all the information up front. I do not like emails where someone sends me, here's 6 million attachments. Because the minute you send me that many attachments, I'm like, oh, I really have to set aside an hour to do this. And a lot of people are time poor. You want to give them the best information in the most concise way so that you get an answer quickly. That's really important. Read and reread. Like I said, you should give yourself time to create these materials. Don't just rush them because you've then promised them to someone, because it's so easy to miss typos. It's so easy to miss, inconsistent information, formatting, font sizes, all of that kind of stuff. Make sure it's ready to go out. So spend time, generally if I'm making a presentation, it will probably take me a good 1 whole day of making the whole thing and then coming back to it and working on it again for maybe a couple of hours to polish it, to make sure everything's in the same place, to make sure, for example, if I'm putting a copyright logo for my company on the page, then they're all in the same place, that there's page numbers that all correlate. If I'm putting in a content page as well, maybe all the page numbers are right for those pages as well. All of that kind of stuff. It takes a long time to make a presentation look good. So make sure you're putting in the time, but also make sure the most important thing about the presentation is the information. But the information is written, so it needs to be like 70% written, 30% visual. But make sure that they're talking to each other as well. The next thing I would say is keep it clean. I will often get people who send me decks through that have like 7 different images or 7+ images all on the same page. If I'm honest, people are probably not going to spend more time looking at all the different images you put on a page. I generally prefer using whole pages with just one image to really define, this is an image page. Other pages, this is information. Read this, focus on the written information or focus on the image. The more things you put on a page, the more things you cram in, the more the eye is confused. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm looking in the right place of really what you want me to be focusing on. The only pages that you would have kind of multiple different images on the same page would be, for example, comparable pages or like wish list cast pages. Because the other thing is, the more things you try to cram on a page, the messier it will look as well. Like I said, it's very confusing to the eye. Less is more. It just looks better presented. And the final thing that I will say as well is, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, but keep it short and sweet. Keep it as compact as you can. That doesn't necessarily mean send me something that's only a page long. Send me something that's a well-presented, really thought through, informational presentation. Because, like I said, I don't want something that's only a page. I don't want something that's 25 pages long. I want something that's kind of 10 to 12 pages long with that cover page and contact page at the end. The contact page is actually really important. And for anyone who doesn't have an email signature, please get one, because you are actually hurting yourself by not having it. I have been in situations a number of times where, and even now, I still get it to this day, where I may have a potential new client or someone who is looking to use my services reach out to me, and I'm really busy. I'm running around doing lots of different things. And I may not always have 5 minutes or 10 minutes, 20 minutes to reply, but sometimes I might have 5 minutes to just chat. So I will try to sometimes just call people. If I'll get an email, an inquiry email, and I might just call you, say, I'd love to have a chat with you. I just saw your email. I'm really busy at the moment, but just quickly, maybe let's book in something in the next couple of days. There's very often that people might have questions about the presentations you send through. If they have your contact details, they can actually call you. Again, it's about time frame to respond. They are more likely to be able to contact you in lots of different ways, i.e. mostly email and phone calls, to be able to get back to you quickly. So allow them to do that because it helps you. I personally find it very frustrating when people don't have email signatures. There has been a number of times where a filmmaker might have said to me, I urgently need this thing. And then I've realized that they haven't given me all the information that I need. And so I go, right, okay, I'll just call them quickly to ask them to send me something, and realize I don't have their number. Now, they need what they want me to give, but I also need something from them. I then still have to wait for them to see my email before I'm possibly going to get what I need so I can do what they need. So again, please make sure you have email signatures, but most importantly as well, have a contact page. It should state the name. Really try and have just one person on the contact page. But if you want, maybe you're a producing duo, fine to have two. But it needs to have your name, your role on the film, your contact number, contact email. Because the other thing as well is when you're dealing with big companies, let's say maybe you're talking to Channel 4 or BBC or any of the studios, mini majors, big independent distributors, there is multiple people who are working in a team at any one time. And you may send it to one person, but they may send it to someone else to review. They may send it to another member of the team. They're like, oh, this may actually work for this division better than our division. We're going to send it over to them. So they send it over, but then they don't know how to contact you to talk about it. So then they have to wait for their colleague to send the email. Make it easy for them to get in contact with you. Make sure you put that contact page in. And that is it for the presentation today. So again, like the other sessions I've done this week, my email address is on here as well. If you're interested in taking any of S.O.U.L Cognition's other courses, you can see the links to our website. We run courses about film, finance, sales, and distribution. We also have a Creating Your Pitch presentation course that we will be running in March next year as well. So have a look at that. And I will stop sharing my screen as soon as I find my mouse. And we can start doing some questions.
Thank you so much for that, Jasmine. That was really insightful. Thank you. So I'm going to kick off the questions. Do you have a preference on the kind of film? Do you have a preference on the kind of films or shows you work on?
It depends on which capacity. So when it comes to the clients I work with on a consultation basis, I'm really more than happy to work on anything. I think that it's fun to be able to work on a diverse set of projects. I tend to work more with feature film than I do with anything else. So in terms of format, that's kind of where I mostly sit. I have advised on like limited series and TV shows before as well, but predominantly a lot of the clients I work with are in feature. In regards to my own producing slate, I've currently got 2 feature documentaries currently in production. I've got a slate of narrative films, both feature and shorts, that I'm working on as well, developing on. I generally tend to, in the narrative space, I tend to produce more in the genres, like genre titles. So kind of thriller, horror, sci-fi. I would look at doing an action, but it would have to be very, me and my producing partner call it like classy genre. So we like things that have like a really good solid story and very kind of human interest, character driven. So for example, we've got a thriller film that's like a contained thriller that is set in one house over the course of one evening, that's very much about like abusive relationships. and breaking free from that. We've got another film that is very much about kind of female leadership, but it's actually a folk horror. So again, it's things that are, you know, a bit more intelligent than just being entertainment for the sake of entertainment. There is kind of a deeper underlying meaning there.
Almost like understated,
yeah.
Yeah.
So something that's consistently entertaining, but there's like a deeper message within it.
All those films you just described sound incredible, and it's getting my creative juices flowing. With that, I'll move on to the next question. Just out of interest, what do you think about sizzle reels, and do you think that they can be good additions?
I always find sizzle reels quite difficult, if I'm honest. I think they work best for crew. So for example, if it's DOP or I always think editors, it's really hard for a sizzle reel for an editor because I don't get an idea of cuts apart from how you potentially cut your own sizzle reel. But again, that will be dependent on the type of projects you've worked on before. So if you've worked on one comedy and then you've worked on a horror, how are you going to put those together? But I don't get any sense of it. So I think with kind of physical on-set crew, I think they work best. So, you know, costume, makeup, DOPs, they work really well for them. I find it really hard to look at a director's sizzle reel because I don't always get enough information about like the whole story. So I generally prefer to kind of watch directors' work. I prefer to watch editors' work. And so that's kind of my general feeling about sizzle reels.
Off the back of that, I guess, as an added question for myself, if you're a director writer and you send trailers, would that be acceptable in lieu of a sizzle reel, because that gives a little bit more of story?
As a director writer, I like to see writing samples, and I'd like to see like some of your shorts, at least. If you haven't made a feature, if you've made a feature, I'd like to see your feature. It's the same as if you go to an agent, if you ever go to an agent and you're looking to attach a director that has made features before, they do send you links to their previous work. So again, with writers that I go to their agents, they'll send you samples. So to me, it's always, I want to see writing samples so I can actually read your work, because the thing is as well with a trailer, you could have way better dialogue that hasn't been included in the trailer, or those could be the only good bits of the dialogue. Like, I don't know, because there's not enough information for me to make a decision. So yes, that's generally what I say with writers. And with writers, I want to see writing samples, because especially with writers, the execution of the film doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your writing, because they could have completely cut massive sections. They could move it around in a way that you go, I don't feel like this story makes any sense anymore. So I prefer to read versus watch for a writer.
That makes sense. This is so insightful. Do you have an example of a past project that was successful that you can share?
I think that's really difficult, because I mean, put it this way, on one of the documentaries that I'm working on at the moment, the interesting thing about documentary as well is you've got to remember it's like a reversed process, because you go out and film and then collect all the like filming that you've done over the period that you've done it, and then gone, right, where's the story? So you then have to write the script from what you've already got to hope that you've got something that makes a story. So you'll try and do the fundraising quite early on in the process. So one of the documentaries I'm producing, we actually brought a sales agent on board just after our first shoot, basically all based on us showing them some sample material and our presentation. But also you've got to remember, there is essentially no synopsis at that point. It's like these are kind of the themes that we're thinking about talking about in the film, but also if they don't come up when you're filming, they don't come up when you're filming. So yeah, we managed to attach a sales agent onto our film based on that. We managed to raise a pot of private equity as well. People are always creating pitch decks. It's the first piece of information you will ever send to someone on a project. So I've got pitch decks that, you know, I create for my clients that have helped them to raise the full budget of their films. I've done other ones that people have asked me to do or advise on, just to get to the point of helping them attach a director. So there's a number of them, but I would say that I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing my clients' decks with anyone else, because they're not, I helped make them and sometimes I wholly made them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they would want me to send them around to people. But yeah.
Absolutely. And off the back of that, also, it's worth noting that Netflix have just opened a short documentary fund. It runs from the 4th of January to the 31st of January, and the fund is between 20 grand and 40 grand. So have a look at that if you're looking to make your first or second or even third short documentary. Next question is, does Jasmine know where we can access templates for pitch decks that we can work from?
There's not really any template. Like I mentioned before, I run a course that I think the next session, it's a webinar session in March. I can't remember what date in March. It will be available on my website, where I literally do this is the stuff you should do for a creative deck, for like an industry approach. We go through it kind of like page by page by me telling you what to put in there, like what you should be putting in there. It's not I'm telling you this is exactly what you should write, but you will start from scratch for every project you ever make. If you can have a kind of structure template is what I try and teach people in this course. But yeah, there's no real kind of general template. The template that I've put together in this course is mostly down to all of the things that I've looked at over the years and the information that I know it's important for other people to know. So if you are interested in that, the link's available to register on my website.
Awesome. So someone asks, I am in the middle of writing a script for a short film that takes place in a Western African country. In terms of budget, how do I find out regarding region expenditure?
I think whenever you're planning to shoot somewhere else, talk to someone in that location, because crew rates are different in every place around the world. Like, we know that realistically you'll expect to pay more for crew in London than you would in Birmingham, for example, because of like London just being really legitimately expensive. But you know, also in the same, if you go to the Outer Hebrides in Scotland, you know, that'd probably be another rate again. So the best thing to do is always talk to local people, or if not local, at least people who have experience shooting where you're looking to make your film.
Awesome. Do you have any advice for starting an idea for a film or series as a complete beginner?
Do you know what? It sounds like a really like bad piece of advice, but I'm a really big believer in just get all the stuff in your head down on a piece of paper, and then try and work out, okay, the first thing that I'll do is like say, okay, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and then I go, right, okay, where does Act 1 end? Where does Act 2 begin? Where does Act 2 end? Where does Act 3 begin? Where's the end? Because once I have an idea of that as well, because I'm just, if you think about like the basic thing of Act 1 is the setup, and the end of Act 1 is kind of when the incident, something that triggers it into Act 2 will need to happen. Act 2 is the point where like loads of the action happens. You need to somewhat build up to it a little bit and then really have all the action. And Act 3 is the resolution. So if you start with, okay, what's the idea? Word vomit. I'm a big fan of like word vomit, just get it out of your head so that you have something to kind of physically play with. But more than anything else, like just start, because it's really, really easy. And I think there's a writer director that I know that just said to me, the best thing you can do is, as a writer, just get up every day and the first thing that you ever do, just start writing. And it doesn't matter if you do like 10 pages, it doesn't matter if you do 10 minutes, but just get up every day and it's like the first thing that you do some writing, because the minute you start doing something else before you start writing, you'll get distracted. and your head won't be in the game, and you're thinking about the other things you want to do. So the best thing is, like I said, I'm a big fan of a word vomit. I've got a very, very early stage film that I'm developing with a writer friend of mine, and it literally came out of a nightmare that I had. And I was like, oh my God, that's a brilliant concept for a horror movie. But again, with an undertone of something that's like very psychological. And I think I woke up at like 3 o'clock in the morning. I grabbed a pen and paper, wrote it down, word vomit after word vomit that I could remember from my dream, and then went back to bed. And then the very next day, I messaged this friend of mine. I was like, I know this would be like the perfect project for us to work on. I know this is be right up your street. Here's what I wrote down at 3 o'clock in the morning. Let me know your thoughts. Let's get on a call. And it was all just word vomit from my mind, because it's better to have something, because once you put it on a page, it becomes more tangible, I think, as well. So yeah, just start and talk to other people, talk to other writers. I think that's the big thing as well. I think that writers don't talk to other writers enough, because it's really, writing is quite a solitary job. But I also think it's good to have a network of other writers around you as well, that you can also help to bounce ideas off, like people who you trust, and respect their opinion.
That's really good advice, actually. As someone that writes myself, I can wholeheartedly say I don't really have any. I probably do have writer friends, but I don't have writer friends that I know are writer friends or engage with as writer friends. So yeah, we're all very solitary people.
The big thing is, I think I have a lot of writer friends, and I talk to them quite a lot, and it's like, let's just bounce ideas off each other. And it's genuinely just like, over coffee, like table tennis. You can watch the idea just bouncing between our minds. And because of the fact that, especially when you are starting with an idea and you've got no one else to bounce it off of, you can go so far into the rabbit hole on certain things. And then sometimes you go so far into the rabbit hole on one thing that you kind of lose sight of something else, and you're like, right, okay, now I need to do this thing. And it can become quite kind of disjointed in a way, because the thing is about a writer that I always have huge respect for is that I only know the story that I read on the page, but you've created a world that you know everything about. You know all of the things, but it can sometimes get to a point where you've edited it so much and played around with it that some of the things that I need to know to understand the story are not on the page anymore. So it's really good to have other writers there, especially, like I said, when you don't have anyone else on board the project, who may offer, if you read mine, I'll read yours, to give you feedback, to say, I'm not quite sure I understood this, or I feel, did you have some pages here before that had another scene in it? Because I feel like that's not working now. Because you need someone else to feed back into you, like into your head, so that you understand how someone else is reading it. Because like I said, you know everything, whereas someone else is reading it for the very first time. And I think I used to do a lot of drama at school, and my drama teacher was always telling me that I speak too fast. And the reason that she said it was like, you've got to remember, the audience has never heard your lines before. So you've got to explain it, and you've got to say it so they understand it. It's not just you saying it. They need to understand it. So I think it's really important to find your group of trusted writers, and basically try and make your own writer's room of people that you trust.
That's a good piece of advice. Yeah. What is your comparable film? What if your comparable film is older than 5 years? Should you then detail how the target audience is different or lucrative and relevant for now? So say your film is older than 5 years, can you use like your target audience is different, the fact that the target audience is different, how lucrative it is, and how relevant it is for now, to kind of get that across the line?
I mean, put it this way, if the film was like 7 years old, I'd be like, just use it, it's fine. But if you're talking about something that's like 25 years old, no way should you use that film. Like if it's more than 10 years old, definitely not. Do not use it, because it is just a completely different audience. It's kind of like, I mean, obviously time difference wise, film moves really quickly. That's the thing as well. Trends move really, really quickly. So it's kind of like, if you're using a film that's, like I said, more than about 7 years old, it's kind of like my parents trying to compare buying a house when they were young to me trying to buy a house in 2020. Like, it's not the same. So it's kind of like using historic information to inform how things go today. It doesn't work. So my biggest thing is, and sounds harsh, and I'm sorry for this, but in all honesty, I would say try to do more research, because there are so many films out there, like so many films out there. So there should be other comparables for your film. I would be worried if, because the thing is as well, a comparable is not just about the genre of the story, it's mostly about the target audience. It's like, if I had to think about it as a pie chart, it's like 70% target audience, 30% genre. Like, that's what it is. It needs to fit within, you're mostly talking about who's going to watch your film. And the comparable titles is, oh, the people who are watching this will also like my film. So if it's older than 5 years old, you're talking about an audience that's not watching in the same way anymore. That's why we kind of generally say no more than 5 years.
And also the industry's changed so dramatically over the last 10 years that, yeah, I mean, like with video on demand, things are completely different. So yeah, completely get that. So someone asked, hi, I have written a script, which is an adaptation of a children's book that I have written. What is the best way to protect my IP and option rights if a producer wants to pitch it to Channel 4?
Get that legal agreement in place. Like, I would not allow a producer to pitch anything on my behalf unless they had like written an agreement. You've got to remember as well, it's not just, you don't actually have to give, I don't know if you're talking about a TV show or a film, but you don't actually have to give them all the rights. You can technically just do an option agreement that just gives them, basically it says that, you know, you're going to option my project, but TV show, okay, great, thanks for clarifying. If it's a TV show, you can just do an option agreement with them. I would always say, unless they have the monies, right? Actually, no, never. When before a project is going into production, if they're just optioning it, don't ever sign an option agreement in like without an end date. That's the number one piece, right? Don't ever sign an option agreement that's like, I'm optioning this. Like, only ever, especially if you've never worked with a producer before, I generally say like give them an option for a year, maybe 2 years max. And then at the end of that period, if they haven't done anything with it, well, you'll say either you can extend the option and you can pay me more money, or I get the rights back and it sits back with you again. So I've seen writers do it before where they're like, I've signed this option agreement. And I'm like, oh, okay, what's the term on it? And they're like, it doesn't have one. I'm like, so what? You just signed away your project for the rest of its life and you'll never get it back. Don't do that. Don't do that. I honestly, I want to cry for writers who I've like heard that have done that, but don't ever sign an option agreement unless it has an out date. At the point that the project goes into production, and you're actually going to get paid a fee from the budget, then yes, they'll option the rights for the project for that. But you don't have to give them all of the rights in the project. You actually only need to give them the rights for whatever medium they're making. So what you'll often find is that I don't mind if someone's like, if it's a TV show, I'm assigning the rights, or, you know, you're optioning the rights for the TV rights for this project. But as the writer, you can also hold back certain rights. So you could, for example, hold back the film rights. You could still retain the film rights. So if they ever wanted to make, like, I don't know, let's say it's Peppa Pig or something like that. The Peppa Pig writer, the person who came up with the idea for Peppa Pig, they could only have given the rights for the TV show. They may have retained the rights for the film. So if they ever wanted to make a Peppa Pig film, they'd still have to go back and option those rights separately. So that writer gets paid again, which is how it should be. Now, sometimes people might want to take certain other rights as well. It's pretty standard to give people kind of sequel, prequel, spin-off rights. especially from the film side. But as being the writer in the film, you can also negotiate that you get the first right of refusal to write those things. So again, that's something that I would expect to see. So there's a number of different things, but again, like, find yourself a lawyer who can also advise you. Again, you don't necessarily have to go to one of the big firms. Find like an independent solicitor who can really just look over these agreements, because the big thing is, as a writer, I'm sure you've not necessarily had to deal with like loads and loads of legal agreements, but you don't know what you don't know. But I'd prefer you to try and find a solicitor who can advise you now than realize you've signed away something that could have brought, could have paid your income for the next like couple of years because you just didn't know to ask for it in your contract.
Thank you very much. And our last question of the session is, I would like to direct my own short film to keep total ownership. If I decide to bring in a director, how do I keep total ownership of my film?
Okay. There is a couple of different meanings of total ownership. I would firstly say you're never going to have total ownership of your film because it is a collaboration. Unless you plan to do all the jobs yourself, there are going to be other people that come in with ideas, and some you may like, some you may not, but you're collaborating with other people. So you're always going to have collaboration. It's not total ownership. Total ownership can also mean, okay, well, I get all of whatever this film makes, I get all of it. So that can be ownership in terms of like a monetary thing. If you wanted to work with a director, the first thing I would say is that make sure if you did want to bring on another director, if you considered it, I would say make sure that it's a director that you actually share the same vision with, because that's a really big thing. Like, it's so easy to go, I want to work with this director, or, oh, there's this director that's a friend of mine that I'd really love to work with. And you start working together and you just realize they've taken it off in a whole different direction. But also, if you are the producer, because this is a big thing, a lot of directors don't realize that when you actually make films or TV or whatever, the producer is actually the one that has final cut. It's not the director. Unless you're Martin Scorsese, you do not have final cut on most of the films that you ever work on. It's about the producer is actually the one that has the final cut of the film. So if you were to keep yourself on as the producer, as well as maybe being the writer, or maybe you want to co-direct it, I don't know, but establish who has final cut of the film. Because final cut basically means that if the director goes off and makes a version of the film that you hate, you could still go and hire another editor and make a whole new version of it, because they don't have the right to make the final, they don't have the right to force you to try and get their version out if you think it's terrible. But just be, very clear. And like I said, the very first thing I would start with is make sure that you find a director that you actually really like and share the same vision of. The great thing about short films as well is that it's really, it's a great opportunity for you to learn and explore and do things that, to really hone your craft, but also to really explore working with other people. Because a lot of the time it's, if you've never worked with anyone before, how do you know it's going to work? Well, you don't. So explore it in short films, but maybe find something else that you might want to make first with another director and see how it goes before you make the thing that you're really passionate about. Because if you're really passionate about it and then you start working with someone and realize that it's not going the right way, then it can be a really horrible experience. But if you are truly passionate about directing it, then just direct it, would be my advice. Just do it.
Just as a small side note to that, if you're planning, if it is a short film and you're planning to get funding through BFI Network, they won't let you write, direct, and produce at the same time. So you've got to either choose to be a writer-director or a writer-producer, or you could just be the writer and bring on a director and producer, but you can't do all three at the same time.
It's mostly because you're super overworked.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's about like how much time you actually have to give to the film versus how much time you're going to be running around like a maniac trying to get everything done.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much, Jasmine. Again, another amazing session. Please do check out Jasmine's website and book onto her courses. I know that I will. You'll get a recording of this session afterwards if you booked a ticket through our Eventbrite link. And I hope you'll join us tomorrow for our last session of the week. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.